Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Canada's Used Car Week. My name is Nick Zulovich, part of the team at Cherokee Media Group, and very grateful for each and every one of you spending some time with us here this morning for what should be a fascinating discussion. Identity fraud, a growing threat to dealers, and we have a great conversation in store with Andrew Lemoine, who is the CEO of Autocorp.ai, and Carl Davies, who is the head of fraud and identity compliance at Equifax Canada. Gentlemen, thank you again for being with us this morning, making yourselves available. And Andrew, we'll start with you, and then Carl, your perspectives as well. Certainly don't want to be too overly dramatic, but certainly fraud is very much a top of mind and a serious topic in the automotive space. Just from your observations, your encounters, just what's been the most dramatic or interesting, as we allow folks to mingle in.
So let them roll in.
The crowd is growing, which we're very glad to see.
Come on in, take a seat.
What's been the most intriguing, complex fraud situation that you've seen in the past year or so? What were some of the components? What were some of the elements of that situation?
So I always look at things from a dealer perspective. So like the most dramatic, we have to separate theft and fraud. There's been a lot of theft, a lot of car rings. But when you actually break it down into a dealership, it's narrows down to ID. It's either around ID or it's around income. And that's where we're seeing the biggest impact on dealers. And so ID being, I think, the easiest one that can be solved right now with technology. So you're having a lot of synthetic ID fraud. Either it's stolen ID or it's a manufactured one that you cannot tell the difference, Nick. If you held a real one in your hand and a fake one, you cannot tell the difference. And they're just getting so sophisticated with the way that they create these. And so if you think about it, a dealership's operations, arguably there's no other industry that handles more IDs in a day. You know, every single test drive, every single turnover, every single file, even just to do a quote, they're handling IDs. But what's the checks and balances? Well, right now, a lot of the times in the dealerships, it's a gut check and balance, and you're relying on the salesperson to do a gut check, and that's not good enough today. You know, it got us this far, but we're really starting to see a lot more of this, and so. It's like a sickness that nobody's speaking about, because I speak to dealers every single week and everyone's dealing with it, but no one's talking about it. So we'd like to start talking about it a lot more and solving it together, because that's what we see is like every dealer I speak to, hey, did you have any fraud incidences? It's like, oh yeah, don't really, it's almost like they're embarrassed. It's like, I don't really want to talk about it. Yeah, we lost 3 vehicles last year, or we had a test drive that ran away with an Escalade last week, and I'm like, but no one's speaking about it. We don't have a blog, we don't share this, we're certainly not posting it on LinkedIn. Got ripped off this week, right? So no one wants to talk about it, but we do, because we need to solve it.
Absolutely. Carl, your perspectives, what have been some fraud observations you've seen recently, and some of the complexities and elements that you've observed?
Yeah, and we're playing past the baton with the mic today,
yeah.
So just from an Equifax perspective, I'll take it up a little bit. We see a bunch of stats across multi-sectors, but we're focusing on auto today. We saw an increase of, I've got some notes here because I'm getting stuff, 25% increase year over year in auto fraud in Ontario, 54% in Quebec. I'm not sure if that's going to surprise anyone with the difference, but that's where we see it. So your first point about, is it dire and do we want to be doom and gloom? I mean, it's a big problem. I think we have ways to solve it, as Andrew pointed out, but we need to come together and do more kind of around that. I love the question about sophistication as well. I would there's sophisticated fraud. There's a lot of dumb fraud out there as well. Like, there really is. We see, to Andrew's point, we see a ton of IDs all the time, and they're classic. The one I saw a few weeks ago was a fake driver's license. It was actually pretty good, except in the photo, the guy had a palm tree behind him and his wife's arm around his neck. But somebody accepted it. I kid you not. Somebody actually accepted it and said, yeah, that's fine. So there's dumb fraud that we can solve really, really easily, and we just gotta put that to bed. It makes no sense. But there is a lot of sophisticated fraud out there. Actually, I was talking to Carl the other day at Autocorp, and he was saying he could go online and he got to a certain point where he could almost buy a really good fake ID for like $200-300.
Wow.
It's actually really simple to do today, and these are really good ones. Like you won't be able to look at the human eye can't actually detect the differences unless you're highly trained. Which brings us to the point, like we really need to think about the technology that's going to help us get there. In terms of just some interesting stories about sophistication, it's not specific to auto, but what I would say about fraud is there's never a single event. It's not like I just do something and extract the value. Leading up to a fraud, there's usually multiple events. If you think about ID theft, firstly, I'm going to social engineer Andrew. I'm going to pretend to be a family member and say, hey, I need some money. Can you give me some? Give me access to his account, maybe SIM jack him to take over. There's a bunch of different fraud schemes that will happen. But some of the more interesting ones recently are scams, and I think everybody must be getting phone calls, or it's just me. And every single day, someone's calling me up and trying to do something. And so we're seeing a lot more identity theft, whether it's stealing somebody's identity, like taking over Andrew's, or a synthetic identity where I'm creating a mix of all three of us to actually create it. Like a lot of that is being driven by these sophisticated scams, which the most interesting one I heard recently, someone had bought somebody's information off the dark web, put through a dollar transaction from Amazon, then called them up and pretended to be their bank and said, hey, I think you've been scammed. Do you need some help? It's a dollar transaction from Amazon. They log into their account and go, oh yeah, it is. It's Amazon. Yeah, okay, you must be my bank. They go, okay, give me your password and I'll sort it out. While they're on the phone, that account is emptied. But also, that account can then be used to actually create other accounts or get enough personal information that I can start building up a new driver's license with my photo that I can then walk into a dealership and take over. So you have fraud isn't a linear, fraud is actually a web of various different activities and to actually affect that problem.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Frightening to say the least how quickly it can escalate. Carl, we'll continue with you and then Andrew, your perspectives as well. In light of the background you've already shared, let's get right into some recommendations. I love the term that you just used, the dumb fraud component. I think that's excellent.
McLovin's not buying a car.
Well,
what are some basic processes, some red flags to watch for, that sort of thing? Perhaps to your example, the palm tree in the background. What are some rudimentary steps that all dealerships perhaps should be implementing to at least stop some of that dumb fraud from germinating into something much more complex?
So if you'd asked me the question a couple of years ago, it would have been a lot easier, right? I would have said, look at the person in front of you. If they're sweating and really nervous and want to get out quickly, it's risky. The problem is now you've got a lot of digital channels coming in as well, so it's really hard to see a stroll by and sweating digitally, it doesn't work. But those behavioral markers, to me, are still some of the most important things you can think about. So whether it's a biometric, like a document, or whether it's getting some other information, and it sounds really obvious when you talk about it, but not a lot of people can do it, and certainly not a lot of people actually use it. So for example, if I tap my card in a Starbucks in Vancouver an hour ago, and now I'm showing up in Andrew's dealership in Toronto, that doesn't make sense. It happens all the time. If, for example, I provide an email on my digital quote that was created an hour ago, that's a huge red flag, because it's likely being created for that. So for me, I think behavioral markers are still going to be some of the really important things that we need to think about. If you want to know some specifics and very tactical things, I would focus on those kind of things. If there's urgency around the deal, it's problematic. We see that in auto. We also see it in the mortgage broker space as well. When people don't really care about the price or the rate that they're getting, it's probably because they're not going to pay, right? They don't really care if you're offering them 15% like this. I don't care. I'm out of here. You're never going to see me again. So it's that kind of thing. Those kind of behavioral markers, I think, is some of the most important things. But I do want to emphasize the fact that believing you can do this manually is not going to work for you. Again, there's very, very convincing fake IDs that you can buy very easily and very cheaply that most people will not be able to look at. So you really have to make sure that you've got the right technology in place to protect yourselves and ultimately protect Canadians, because when this happens, the cost is to everybody.
Absolutely. Andrew, you mentioned that you're on the road weekly. What's maybe some things that you're telling every single store that you might be visiting?
At our company, we weren't even thinking about fraud 2 years ago. It wasn't on our roadmap. It wasn't part of our vision. And it's became a main focus because the problem is so massive. And I said, we need to integrate this into every single thing we do. So obviously there is behavior like Carl touched on. A dealer last week in Ottawa had a customer come in and they time it perfect. They're gonna get you at Friday at close, right? Manager's probably already gone home. A couple sales guys are rushing just to get out of there because they wanna get home for dinner because they gotta be back at the dealership the next morning at 8 a.m. for their meeting. And they know this, right? They know how dealers operate, so they'll strategically show up, sales guys rush, send them out on the test drive, got the ID, car's gone. So that's problem number one. Here's problem number two, the same incident. So next day, police report, OPP show up. OPP run the driver's license. It's the fourth dealership, to Carl's point, that fraudster had hit in a 4-day span, right? And so that's where you have the police frustrated going, why can't we communicate? Because we knew about this fraud and this fake ID was flagged 2 weeks ago or a week ago, but you didn't, right? And so it's just, they're too sophisticated just to rely on that face-to-face gut check, like I said, and we need to take the gut check, we need to convert it into a tech check. So, if that even makes sense. We're going to solve it with technology.
Well, and to Andrew, to continue with you, you referenced that potential 8 o'clock meeting the next morning at the dealership. Perhaps during those sessions, training can be implemented, or at some point during the day or during the week. How can dealerships especially start to blend in some fraud prevention strategies within their sales meetings or what have you? How can it be a top of mind topic? And then after Andrew, Carl, your thoughts too.
Yeah, I think two things that our industry is going to be talking about now, and it's going to become a normal part of our industry, is fraud prevention, and then in light of what happened last week, cybersecurity, right? I've never heard so many dealers talking about something. What is cybersecurity? Well, I'm sure everybody in the room knows about it now. And it's going to be no difference with fraud as well. And it's never just going to be one thing. So we can't just rely on technology, and you can't just rely on a manual process. It's got to be a combination of both. So we got to train the staff on a store level on how to use technology that's available and how to do these manual checks, like Carl said. Are they sweating? Are they nervous? Time of day. If there's any sales managers in the room, you know if the deal is too good to be true, it always is. Any manager will tell you that, right? It's Friday afternoon, a couple's in the showroom, they'll take the purple station wagon, and you know what? They don't even want a discount, they're gonna take it at full as standard. And oh yeah, how much money are they putting down? They're gonna put any money down. They have a trade, no trade, but they really gotta go. Can we get this wrapped up? Yeah, slow down, right? Red flag, red flag. So we have to train for those signs, but we have to start to integrate other layers of protection. Absolutely.
Carl, your thoughts on the education component?
Yeah, I guess this question a lot. It's and if I was thinking about trying to educate every consumer, my views might be a little different, because the problem is fraud changes all the time. Like, that's one of the things. It's such a fast-moving environment. But as as commercial organizations, we absolutely have a responsibility to actually do more. And so I do think it's important, but there is a level. Like, I don't expect every dealer to be a fraud investigator. That doesn't happen. But I think what is important is that we understand the trends, we understand the types of attacks and red flags that are coming forward for those, in order to be able to protect ourselves and ultimately our consumers. The one thing I will say though, that just to add on to Cole's point, it might not be a very popular subject in this room, but insider threats are a huge problem as well. Okay. So within our own organizations, like, we've seen multitudes of examples whereby there's actually an accomplice within your organization. We've done a lot of work in the mortgage broker space, and you might have even seen some news reports where the broker was saying, hey, I'll put you on my brother's payroll in order to bump your income up to get the rate that you want. We shouldn't think that doesn't happen in our world either. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. Excuse me. So we need to think about obviously training our staff, but we as the leaders of those organizations also need to make sure that we are doing our diligence within our organization to make sure that's not coming forward.
Absolutely, due diligence. That's a great term as well. Carl, we'll let you get a sip of coffee and continue with you. If whether specific about automotive or some other observations in other sectors, and Andrew, your thoughts as well, perhaps specifically in the dealership world, when fraud is thwarted, just how much should that victory be celebrated when an individual or a team spots something and it stops it from germinating into a big problem? How much should that be celebrated within the confines of the organization?
I mean, I would definitely celebrate. It's good news, right? It tells us that our controls are working somewhere, which is good. Conversely, when you know something is bad, I would always say, let's go back to our controls and see where they are. But there is a but here. To Andrew's point, and we've seen this in every industry in Canada, maybe an organization stops a bad guy. It's great news, but it doesn't stop them walking down the street and going to Andrew. And we see that all the time. We see recycled ID. Like, fraudsters are not loyal people. They don't say, I'm just going to attack Andrew's dealership. They will go to every dealership, every lender, every insurance provider, every mortgage monoline, if they think they have a viable ID. And so one of the things that I think is really important, and what I do see has been a bit of a change in approach, is the belief that fraud is no longer a competitive advantage. It's no longer okay for me to say, I don't care if it's on mine, it's on Russ's. Like, that doesn't really work anymore, because it's going to come back to me eventually. And so I think what's critical for us to remember is that, great, we've stopped the fraud, that's important, but we need a mechanism to make that an alert or something that everybody can benefit from. We've been talking to law enforcement recently, exactly the same point. They will often know before many commercial organizations do. So how can we get them into a loop that says, hey, if you found a synthetic ID or a stolen document, how can you make sure that we can get that in our hands so that when we do the tech check, not the gut check, we can have an alert to say, hold on, this was part of a crime, or this ID has been used 15 different times in the last 2 days. Like, it doesn't make a ton of sense. And it's important. A lot of the fraud that we see in auto today is first-party fraud. So what I mean by that is it's me using my own credentials, my own information, to actually perpetrate a fraud. What's increasing, though, is third-party fraud. That is truly what we always think about, where I'm stealing your identity or doing something bad with it. That is increasing in our world. Like, it was like 10% of all frauds a few years ago, now we're closer to 20. So that really is increasing. And in that space, what you have to remember is when these guys are selling cars, they're not out buying jet skis. Like, that's not their own. This is organized crime, right? They are funding human trafficking, drugs, things that we just don't want in our society. So we have to make sure that we're doing all we can to prevent that. And I think sharing our data that we find among us, if we get there, that's when we celebrate.
Excellent. Andrew, your thoughts?
So to that, the way that you asked a question, how do we celebrate? We communicate. We have to communicate it. Like, this has to be solved as a community. Because if they just hit the dealership up the street, that dealership needs to have a way to warn every other dealership, right? And when it comes to selling cars, where all the dealers are friendly competition, but for this, everyone's on the same side. It's the dealer community against the fraudsters, and the dealers are fighting it. And the KYC is on the dealers. Dealers in the room, you all sign lender agreements to get them turned on your portal, but you didn't really read them. It's on the dealer. The KYC, the onus is actually on the dealer, and so dealers need to take whatever steps they can to show that they're doing everything possible in their power to prevent this. It costs a lot. You also asked, why would you celebrate it? We're talking about your insurance rates, your premiums. It goes up so much, and it's costing millions and millions of dollars to your floor plan, to your insurance policies, and it just doesn't stop. It just doesn't stop. So that's how we celebrate it, is we communicate it. So we believe that there's going to be a future where there's almost like a community hub where this stuff can be reported in real time that dealers would have access to. That's where we believe it should go.
Absolutely, love that communication mindset and how to approach. And Andrew, we'll stick with you, and then Carl, back to you. Perhaps you addressed this to a degree, but perhaps elaborate if unfortunately, as you mentioned before we got started, that chatting with dealerships is like, yeah, I just got impacted a week or two ago. What are some of the most important lessons that can be taken out of that situation that could be beneficial down the road? Perhaps maybe it's not broadcast to the world, but at least internally, how to make things better.
I mean, it's negligence. Like Carl said, there's a lot of dumb fraud. So when you get hit with really sophisticated fraud, you can't blame yourself, you can't be hard on yourself. Sometimes it's really, really well thought out and done. But there's also a lot of dumb fraud. And when the dealers go back and they go, you know, there was all the signs, there was the red flags, we just weren't paying attention. You know, the sales manager wouldn't get involved and the salesperson started a week ago. And that is a very typical temperature in a store. And you can't expect our frontline staff to be trained fraud experts because they're not. Right, so it's paying attention to those signals, and then you know, to sound like a broken record, I think starting to think about technology to solve these problems.
Excellent, Carl. Your thoughts on lessons learned, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I don't know what's going on this morning. The first thing to know is there's no silver bullet for fraud, right? Like there's always going to be fraud. It's been around since people started trading. So don't ever think we can completely eradicate it. But what we do need is if you find that you're a victim of fraud, make sure that you're looking at those internal controls so that you know potentially where you got stung and tighten those controls up. Now, you won't stop every fraud, and in some cases it will be super sophisticated and you might be on the periphery. There's no control you can do, but But again, I think that's the most important thing I can say. If you're a victim of fraud, just make sure that you are looking at where that potentially hit. As victims though, like whether it's a true like third-party fraud and you're dealing with a consumer who has their identity impact, that's hugely like problematic for them. And I was just on the victim thing, not necessarily dealers, but we did a study of Canadian consumers recently, and one of the biggest concerns that they had was proving that they were in fact the victim and not the perp, which is super interesting to me. Like, I've been defrauded, something's gone wrong, but I'm worried that people are going to look at me and say it's a problem. And again, that same mentality, that same stigma that comes along with it is exactly why nobody wants to talk about it.
Yeah.
But we've got to change that, because again, you are, like, the way I would position this is you and your business are a victim of a crime. You're the victim here. You and the person who got their identity stolen. So we should really remove that kind of stigma around it and make sure that communication is front and center.
Very good. Very
Yeah.
good. Well, to round out our time together, and we'll yield the remaining time if you all have some questions for our experts here. We'll give some time that y'all can interact here in the room or elsewhere during the conference. Just Carl, will continue with you, and then Andrew to round us out. As we gather next summer for Canada's Used Car Week, each of you touched on how much fraud has risen to the surface here in the past couple of years. When we gather next summer for our conversation about fraud, what developments might be in the offering then? What do you think?
So we almost got through an entire session without talking about AI. Close, so close. But I think that's where it will go, right? And there's a couple of emerging technologies that I think are important, as well as some frameworks as well. So, we're coming into a world of real-time payments potentially in a few years. That's interesting. Open banking is another one. I think what's sort of interesting and terrifying for us at the same time is Gen AI and those frameworks are going to happen around about the same time. I don't think any other jurisdictions have to deal with that. So in the UK, faster payments was there in 2008. But okay, so they had to do that. But now we have got all this kind of stuff plus Gen AI. So I think that's going to be one of the big challenges that is going to dominate fraud in the next couple of years, is how we can combat that. Because again, we talk about AI and we think about, okay, we need to be ethical in its use, we need to be fraudsters don't care about that stuff. They're doing it already, right? So we're always going to be incumbent and kind of behind the 8 ball when it comes to that. So I think that's going to be a really big issue that we have to solve. The other thing that's going to be huge, it's been the main conversation point today, is ID theft. Again, with the increase in scams that we see, that is only going to accelerate what fraudsters can do. So interesting story. I don't know if people have been getting the calls, you pick them up, look, sometimes your mobile carrier will say this is suspicious, sometimes it won't, but you'll pick them up, you'll say hello, nobody answers, and so I found myself saying, hello, who's there, I can't hear you. There's algorithms now that you need just 3 seconds of your voice in order to complete the clone it. And so, where organizations sometimes use kind of voice biometrics to be able to do stuff, that's really problematic. They're also using it for other types of scams. I think everyone's familiar with the one where I think some teenage girl had her voice cloned, then the mum got called and said, I've got your daughter, you need to wire $10,000 somewhere else. those, or send me information about your bank account. Those type of scams, I think, are really going to drive and accelerate some of the challenges we have around sort of synthetic IDs and ID theft and all.
Frightening to a degree.
Yeah, the CRA. CRA is a big one.
CRA's a huge
I paid my taxes, I swear. They keep calling me, telling me I didn't. Now, there's been a change in like dealer behavior too, where we're seeing a lot of these deals starting in a more virtual environment, which opens up, it makes it even easier. For example, that fraud that happened last week that I was talking about, that deal started out of town. It was a customer that was 2 hours outside of Ottawa, started the deal over the phone, right? And so that starts with, hey, can you send me a copy of your driver's license? And then they're getting a texted copy. They're able to send quotes, everything. We can e-sign now. We can send a quote over e-sign, right? And that's how it started. And then when the customer actually showed up in the dealership, it was a rushed experience, right? But from a salesperson's perspective, well, I had everything done. I already had the ID, I had the deal jacket put together, I had the file. So we are seeing a lot more of that they're not starting in the showroom, they're starting over the phone and online today, which makes this easier. And then they're potentially ending in the showroom. Sometimes not even. Some dealers are doing deliveries to home. And then you're doing a signature in the driveway, which is even harder to catch it, right? So I think Carl also made a really good point that, you know what, there's a lot more victims than there are fraudsters. And that number is only going to go up. So that's another thing that we need to be thinking about is how are we handling the victims in the showroom when you're submitting those deals and it's coming back with a flag. Again, I go back to this community and a system where dealers could get information based on the flags, right? So like we believe in giving dealers data up front, so you could do what we call data-driven desking, right? It's giving you intelligent data insights up front, earlier on, so you can make the best decision and handle that customer the best way possible. So it's just about getting you, the dealerships, as much data as possible.
Andrew Lemoine of Autocorp.ai and Carl Davies from Equifax Canada. A round of appreciation for the team.
Better leads, less fraud, more deals. Autocorp.ai.